She's obviously losing some kind of battle.
What is your unique point of view?
It's hard to put into words.
Oh, please. Whatever it says is going to seem related to this.
It's like when you turn on a television set and then you turn it off.
1 hour. That's all you get.
You probably shouldn't get so upset. It's not good for you.
Is that true? Must be. He just said it.
Isn't it nice to feel that way whenever you want? You'll love the way it makes you feel.
Welcome to Mad Men, the weekly show where we discuss a show that used to come out weekly. That show is AMC's Mad Men, which came out from 2007 to 2015. We're now on episode 11 of season 1, titled Indian Summer. I'm Jon Negroni, and I just have one person with me on the show this week, which is sad and happy at the same time, but he's feeling the heat. It's Michael Overhaul. Say, Mike.
Sorry, John. I was
What's all those
rejuvenating.
wires? That's like why do you have the camera pointed to your trousers, your plastic trousers?
To show my really cool new underwear.
That is like such a cool little device too. I did a little like research, Mike. Like I nerded out a little bit on
You nerded
like
out
the
on a
relaxizer
masturbation tool?
Yeah, exactly. Because I was kind of fascinated. I was like, did this like exist? And it totally did. Like legit, it was like a real device, and it was extremely successful. There's like a whole backstory. Do you want to hear it?
Well, did you research it, or did you just like go and ask your older female family members about it?
Why not both? No, like I just a few targeted Google searches. I didn't go to like the library. This isn't like a Dewey Decimal System situation, but no, like for real, so I don't know how much you know about like the post World War II like inventor boom. Like there were a lot of people basically taking the like equipment that was like over industrialized from World War II, because we made all this stuff for the war. Yeah,
it's how we got silly putty. Are you telling me that World War II invented masturbation for women?
I would say that it reinvented the wheel.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah, just a little bit of a callback to a future Mad Men episode. But no, it basically, the story goes that the guy who invented the relaxicizer, the PER, he made it out of like all of these old like bits and wires and stuff that he was able to just like fashion into a totally medically unsound weight loss device that was like totally full of it. But yeah, like people legit bought it because they used it to masturbate, and here we are now, I guess. And they made it illegal. I think in the 70s.
They made masturbating illegal?
Yeah. You might be a little bit in trouble there, Mike. But no, like for real.
I missed that part in Footloose.
They banned the sale of the device itself. I think because it was like very dangerous. It was like causing a bunch of health risks, which to me, I wouldn't have caught the like, I think Matthew Weiner might have been making a little sly connection between this device and cigarettes, because they talk a lot about like the warning labels and everything and all that, but you can still buy cigarettes.
That's true. I can't imagine that those things were safe. I mean, there was like 19 wires connected directly from an electrical box to your genitals, basically. So even if it wasn't
one of the side effects was epilepsy. So there was something to like the electrical shocks. Yeah. Also, there is a connection between like the electric therapy and also Betty, who is being told she has to do like psychoanalytic therapy. But he doesn't say psychoshock therapy, but you could maybe make a little connection between like she literally like masturbates in this episode, and she's in heat, and she could use a relaxicizer. Return to her youth.
She went old school though. She was using that washer dryer combo for dry. I don't know which one was on its heavy spin cycle, but.
What I always
good for
Betty.
What
show I think of a modern show when I see this episode, and that's Scrubs. Do you Scrubs guy?
I was not a Scrubs guy. I was not, unfortunately.
Michael, I feel like how many episodes did you try though?
Every time Maverick had it on in the apartment.
That probably was a lot, because he tends to get obsessed.
He loves it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, Scrubs is one of the best shows of all time. One of the best comedies. Dang, that makes me a little bit sad. I feel like that you would like that show if you. tried it more.
Yeah, maybe. I went through like the classic boyfriend test, or where I had to watch like all 16 seasons of Grey's Anatomy, and it's
God
really
help
just exactly. And I can't do any other medical show, and I get it's a comedy and it's very different. I don't know. I see
I don't
literal
want to veer off
scrubs and I
course.
walk away.
I don't want to veer off course too much, but legitimately, the show Scrubs, like the medical community has said, it's actually one of the most, if not the most medically accurate shows about working in a hospital ever made. It really is. I don't. Yeah, maybe one day I'll be able to convince you, maybe even coerce you into checking it out.
Hey, we're gonna need a rewatch podcast, to do after this.
Mad Men will be over eventually. Yeah, and I do love doing this show. It's a different energy doing it one-on-one. I don't even know where to begin.
It feels more intimate. I'm really enjoying that. I don't know. Obviously, if you're listening, you can't tell. It's like really early in the morning, so it's like a little romantic. Watching John sip his coffee. But
I mean, I'm the morning person. You're not. So I was a little. You were like, you want 7:30? Okay, and I was like, yeah, but I was a little skeptical. It's like, is he going to be up? But hey, here you are.
Here I am, ready to talk about Donald Draper.
This episode starts with death, which is, it's funny. It starts with death. It ends with rejuvenation. This episode begins with Adam Whitman. We see him come back here, and I want to start with this because, like, always watching this episode is really hard for me. I think like that's a very triggering form of death for me, for reasons I won't discuss. But like, genuinely, like watching this scene, like I haven't rewatched the show in a few years, and so like I had to like kind of pause, seeing like what Adam's like doing, and saying the money on the table, the note that he leaves. I kind of have always sort of liked how ambiguous the show is about like why he does what he does, and so you can sort of like read into it however you want. My latest interpretation, I've usually just been sort of like, he probably got really drunk and he's in despair, like his brother abandoned him and paid him off and he doesn't see a reason to live anymore. I have like not a different read, but like maybe something to add to that now, and I'm curious what you think. I think like what ended up with him is that he blew all the money on who knows what, like, and it didn't help. He wasn't able to make something out of himself. He was like running out of money, and he saw like, soon I'll have no money, I'll have no brother, I'll have nothing. And when we meet him earlier in the season, like he's working at American Calculator, he's trying to like, he is like on that path of like trying to make something of himself. And what that money does is, it's like, even with money doesn't solve the problem that like is inside him, the loneliness that he feels. And so that's why I think that he looks disheveled. I don't think necessarily he was like a drunk or anything like that. Maybe he was, but like, I think that that's like irrelevant. And it's such a tragic thing. And it's something that I don't know if like, we'll have to discuss in future episodes, but like definitely not something I don't think Dawn ever fully wrestles with. But yeah, what's your read on that?
Yeah, I mean, I thought a really similar thing to you. I think they do a really great shot of having that like steady but brief shot on the money, like in counting it while he's writing the note, so you can see like there's definitely still money left, but boy, is that not as much as it was when he saw Dawn. And what struck me about the episode, and I think is really true about these kind of incidents when they're happening in real life, and it was just so quick, right? You're like, oh, there's a chair, and oh, it's done. He did it, right? It was really aggressive by the show. But I feel like that's how you experience it in life too. It's like all of a sudden, it just something in your life, it happens, and it's sad, and there's not a build up to it a lot of the times. As far as reasons for doing it, I think you're pretty on the ball there. I like how the show kind of shows that it shows him taking the money, not being able to wrestle with accepting this, not being able to compartmentalize, and then we go directly to Dawn in bed with another woman, being like, why is this hard for you? Just don't think about it. I don't think about it. And it's really easy.
Well, I mean, we have the Betty scene right before that too, right? Where she's alone and she's kind of in Adam's situation to an extent, right? Like her husband hasn't come home. She hears something outside, and like, there's a reason later in the episode, she sort of is like, he's very protective of me. Every time I see this episode, I I definitely catch those little moments with Betty. I really like Betty's story in this because like in some ways it's not as elegantly tied to the rest of the plots, but there is that sort of like running thing with her where she's willing to sort of do unexplainable and weird things in order to get Don's attention, because clearly like Don is like, you know, kind of at his wit's end with her. Like I think he's for the first time seriously considering leaving her. Because you mentioned the thing with him in bed with Rachel. I think the first couple times I watched this episode over the years, I don't think I ever really thought that he would leave Betty for Rachel. I always kind of figured he's like, this is just his next midge. This is just sort of like him, you know, telling her what she wants to hear. I kind of have like a kind of like not there anymore. I kind of think that like he's really wanting to sort of like ditch Betty because he's so like the way he calls us the therapist later. And it's just like, money isn't solving this problem. It didn't solve the problem with Adam Whitman, which he's about to find out. But he just thinks that he can turn everybody into himself, into this like independent person. He thinks that Peggy can be him. He's trying to turn Peggy into him, like literally calls on certain things of like present like a man. You know what I mean? And like I think like his first nod of respect to Peggy is when she, you know, when they bring her in and she's just like, "Can I change the name?" The same thing that he said. He sort of sees himself in her, and that's the respect he gives Peggy. It's the respect he gives Rachel. He sees Rachel as himself, right? So like the fact that Rachel's, you know, mother died in childbirth, but Betty is just like he has no respect for her. He doesn't see himself in her, and so he's not a good person, is what I'm saying.
He's definitely not, and like. Even to, you know, be as absent as he has been at home and then to come home and be mad at her for having a salesperson in the house just because there was another man in the house, right? It seems like it's someone who wants out and is kind of looking for things to be mad about to convince themselves they have reasons, right?
Right. Because he's not even sort of like, hey, that was dangerous. Like, you shouldn't do that. It was just like, you let a stranger into my house. Like, there's a clear, you know, sort of, you know, this is my property. This is, you know, why would you need another man there? You know, a lot of this episode is about like how men are sort of like see themselves as like how they satisfy women, right? Like the whole thing with the rejuvenator and all that. And I think with him, you know, he sort of sees like Betty shouldn't need that. Like, I don't know, like maybe he like looks down on her for that. So I think it's really good that the episode ends the way it does with Peggy sort of turning to that instead of like, you know, being sort of like Dawn. It's like the first indication that Peggy is Peggy. Like, she's not Dawn. Like, there is like a sort of mentor-mentee relationship going on, but we're not just getting sort of like Batman and Robin here. We're getting, you know, who Peggy is going to be throughout this season and maybe the show. I want to be quiet.
Did you feel like his interaction with Peggy after the promotions was just like extremely awkward? Like he's kind of struggling to be a mentor. Like he's like, take the rest of the day. She's like, I have a whole other job to do. I have to keep working.
He's like, hang out with your friends. She's like, I don't have friends. Especially when you compare it with Hildy, the way that Hildy talks to Pete. There's a lot in this episode of like the women in the show, like being a little bit more sort of like standing up for themselves than they did at the beginning of 1960, right? Like Hildy's just sort of like being sarcastic with Pete. And on like on the one hand, I could see somebody being like, hey, like she shouldn't talk to her boss that way. But on the other hand, she's having fun. Like he should not have reacted the way he did of just being like, who do you think you're talking to? He should have just like laughed it off and be like, okay, you know, like I know you got other stuff to do. Like, you know, treat people like you would, like you respect them and believe that they're a human being, you know?
Yeah, that was the thing there. I don't think it was a joke. I think it truly was like, Pete does not respect Hildy, and so Hildy's like, Pete, you are trash. Like, I'm
yeah, but that's the thing is like,
request you have.
That's the thing is that like, I feel like if he was willing to sort of, you know, take himself less seriously, then he would have a much better, you know, relationship with Hildy. He'd have a better relationship with Dawn. Yeah, what do you make of the Pete stuff in this? Because Pete has the package that Adam sent. He is gunning for Roger's position. I always thought it was weird though, because like the dude's 26, maybe 27. He's too young. Like I don't get like why he thinks he's so entitled to Roger's position. You know, like being head of account services. Like he's nowhere near the most senior person for the role. He's definitely still unproven. Like I always found it kind of weird that he expects it, and he like seems to resent Dawn for not like immediately hiring him for it.
I think it's because that it's like one entitlement and privilege that he's grown up with and accustomed to. But I think also it's like this inner need to prove his dad wrong. So like it's almost this like read I have of he just his whole life he's like, if I could just become this and like be this successful, like I'll prove my dad wrong. But the whole time his dad's telling him how, like, he doesn't believe in him, so he has to believe in himself. So I think he gets to this self reality where he believes in himself so much and wants to be at that level so much that he thinks he can just do it.
I think that read only works if in Pete's head he thinks that it's not that his dad disrespects advertising, because his dad like says like, he's like, what you're doing is whoring, stuff like that. So that for that read to work, I think Pete would have to look at the situation and be like, it's not really advertising my dad's looking down on. He's just looking for a reason to cut down what I do because he doesn't respect me. So that's an interesting way to look at it. I hadn't really considered before. Because like it's easy to look at that and just be like, oh, he's just like anti-advertising. We have the truck driver guy in this episode who like dismisses advertising, but is he dismissing it because he genuinely thinks advertising is dumb, or is it because Peggy's being like, let's be honest, Peggy's a doll, but she's being a bit annoying, like with talking about work throughout the whole date, and like it's not a reason to be unkind to her at all, but it's sort of like, we've all been on dates, I think, with people like guys and girls who just like talk about themselves the whole time, and it's not really like a give and take, and that's kind of what we're getting here on both sides. Like I think like he's doing it, she's doing it. It's clearly like the chemistry is I can't say it's off the charts, but in the wrong way. It's like it wasn't even on the charts to begin with.
I kind of thought at first that Peggy was tanking the date on purpose because she didn't want to be there. She didn't want there to be a second date.
That's a fun way to look at it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, she really didn't want to be there.
She did. Yeah, she says so in the beginning of it. And I think like for her, it's like she's been taking homework with her. She's obsessed. And I relate with Peggy the most usually on this show. That's definitely one of those times where I was like, maybe not for like dates and stuff, but I've definitely been in like social situations where I just want to talk about what I'm working on. I want to talk about like the creative stuff that I'm doing because it's all I think about. And it can be hard, to compartmentalize that. Although it's not healthy to do that. Like, it's great to have like passions and everything, but I do think that like Mad Men is a show that does address this at times of how you do need to have a life. Like you do need to sort of, balance work and your creative endeavors and your persona, yourself. Even like in this episode, like the whole thing with like Don's working too hard and he's definitely like leaving Betty high and dry, kind of literally, right? She's clearly like, hey, have sex with me, and he just won't do it. My take is that I just think that he doesn't want to. He wants to leave her. But is that your read?
Oh, absolutely. I was genuinely surprised when he got the partner promotion that he went
to her
to tell her. Yeah.
Why do you think he did that?
Rachel had dinner with her sister or something. Who knows?
Yeah, that is the thing. There's so many contradictions with the guy. Yeah, because you would think that he would tell Rachel, but clearly there is still something tying him to Betty. Like he hasn't made his mind up. I'm trying to remember, when he has the conversation with the psychiatrist. I think it's after, like he's at home and Betty's just sort of like, "Hey, you're gonna come up?" And he's like, I gotta go check on Roger. And no, he goes to talk to the therapist. So I'm trying to think of like what happens in between those moments that maybe has some sort of, actually, I did have a thought while I was watching this the second time where I was like, whenever he's really fully in the Dawn identity, that's when he seems to embrace Betty more. But when he's in the Dick identity, that's when he embraces Rachel a little bit, right? Because Rachel's the one that he sees himself in, his true self, his Dick self. But Betty is the person who he ties more to Don Draper. Like that's Don Draper's wife. It would be kind of odd and strange if she wasn't the first person like Don Draper would tell, right? So there is a little bit of a logic there.
That makes a lot of sense. I definitely think he sees his dick in Rachel and or whatever it was that you said. No, I think that does make a lot of sense, right? Because Betty completes the Don Draper, fantasy. It's
the self-made man.
Exactly.
was able to marry into money. Yeah.
And that's what you do when you become a partner. You go home, you tell your wife, and it's a big celebration.
Yeah. And I don't think he ties as much of the Don Draper identity into Rachel Menken, who is a client, like, somebody that he shouldn't be having a relationship with for a lot of reasons societally. Now, still, it's the person that I think he genuinely cares about, but she is a Jewish woman, and there is like a racism thing there too.
Whoa, John.
Yeah, I think that there's an anti-Semitism there, for sure.
But
for
it sounds
Don
like
Draper.
You're agreeing with the reasons why he shouldn't be with her.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. But I mean, that's the thing, is I think the Don persona is like such a, closed-minded sort of like, I mean, you see it when he's the Don persona in their first meeting, dismisses her, wants nothing to do with her. But when he lets his dick out, I can't. It's low-hanging fruit, man. But yeah, no, when he's his Dick Whitman self, they go together like, they're so cohesive. So yeah. Should we talk about Roger?
Let's talk about Roger.
Last episode with Roger in it for the season.
For forever.
Oh, how sad would that be?
What if, well, let's tell Will that. He's not here. Let's talk about this planet. Let's tell Will.
I think he knows that Roger is a fixture of the show. I mean, I think we already talked about it. He wasn't intended to be. This was supposed to be, I think he was supposed to just die. But no.
It has to be, right? He's supposed to die and Don becomes partner, right? It's much more interesting with him not dying, though.
Yeah, because they find so much stuff to do. I mean, we shouldn't say anything, but yeah. So Roger's back. To remind the viewers, the people who listen and are watching along, last week, of course, Roger had his big heart attack. It's been a month since then. They kind of like glided past the debates, the Nixon-Kennedy debates. Like the next episode is going to be the election, right? Because we're in October, so November's right around the corner. And I was listening to an interview where Matthew Weiner was talking about like why they don't really cover the infamous debate between Nixon and Kennedy. Like it's definitely one of those things. I don't know. I remember learning about it in high school. I remember it being a big deal because it was the first televised debate, and a lot of people consider it the sort of like the turning point of the campaign because Nixon was still ahead at this point, but then the debate sort of turned his favor. But Weiner explained in his interview, he was like, the reason we didn't cover it on the show is because like there's a very small detail, but like in that time, the debate wasn't really seen as the turning point until after the election. It was still something that was a bit of a surprise. It wasn't sort of like everybody knew in the moment. It's one of those things where like in hindsight, people look back and are like, oh, okay, yeah, it was because of this, where it wasn't like discussed that way at the time. So I liked that. I liked that the show doesn't overplay things like that. It sort of like is more restrained with history in a way that's way more interesting, at least to me.
Makes a lot of sense. It's like that was their Hillary Clinton Pokemon go to the polls moment.
I'll have to push back on that. I think that was a turning point even at the time. I remember. Like,
yeah, everybody.
Remember?
Like,
because we were in all those hipster coffee shops and we were talking about how that had changed our minds. Yeah.
Big time.
But
that is an interesting point because like definitely it's something I learned in high school too, right? So for the fact for them not to cover it and do cover the things they are, it's really interesting. And I think why the show works so well and why Matthew Weiner is so great is because he thinks of these things, right? A lesser show definitely would have that and it would be a whole thing.
Yeah.
But that's not
they'd
what
be
the
like
show's
watching
concerned
it.
about.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, it just gets like a passing mention. Roger mentions it while Joan is touching him up. There's only like a little bit of Joan in this episode. She sort of like scolds Peggy for taking a personal phone call. And then of course, she talks to Don about like, oh, hope Roger's okay. Wink, wink, like makes it kind of obvious that, well, I mean, Roger makes it kind of obvious because when he comes back, they applaud him in. Lucky Strike, of course, is back on the show. Always fun to see them. Although we don't see Lee Gardner Jr. We only see his dad. But Roger comes back and Joan does his color, and Roger has this really like terrible moment with her because she's clearly like upset about what happened. She loves him, like genuinely, like there's real love there. And his response, is just so callous. It's just so sort of like, I'm so glad that I got to roam those hillsides, like being so skeevy about something that means so much to her, right? And I think this is a big turning point for their relationship.
yeah, for her to be like so worried, so like in love, and to him come back and go, "You were the finest piece of ass."
Yeah, because it's
I have a lot of awards and a lot of trophies, but you, Red, are at the fucking top.
just horrible. Like I genuinely just like, it's such a cringeworthy scene. And there are a couple of movies that get mentioned here. There's a Place in the Sun gets mentioned when Rachel's talking to her sister, right? The 1951 film. We covered it on Cinemaholics 2 years ago because it celebrated, or no, last year. It's 51. So yeah, but very, very sad movie that they mentioned in terms of like, oh, he has the person killed or whatever. And there is still some of that lingering sort of story stuff coming in from the episode last week with the apartment, and this whole feeling of like the women with the married men. And I do want to bring up the way that like we see the way Joan is with Roger. It is a bit of foreshadowing, right, for the Rachel and Don. Rachel's so naive about this like relationship she has with Don, and really sees it as something that could like mean something. But of course she is being super coy about the extent of the relationship with her sister, right? Like, are you seeing that goy? A little bit.
Oh, no,
nothing's happening. We're literally like 2 scenes ago, she's like in bed with him. Yeah. But
she's
of course she would say
whipped, that. Man. Anyways.
Yeah, nothing's happened with Don. Yeah.
Exactly. She's with a dick, baby. That's an interesting juxtaposition I wasn't really thinking about, but yeah, they're definitely both very naive women. And I think it's really interesting to see Rachel already convincing herself that Dawn is very unhappy with Betty and going to leave Betty, and she feels like it's imminent, something that's going to happen quick. And I think
it is. I think that is like the correct. I think she's actually right about that, even though normally that wouldn't be the case, right?
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, I guess he could leave Betty soon. I feel like it'd be a while before they are public, right? You got to think of these things.
Yeah, clearly you have, Mike.
Hannah, if you're listening, I love you very much, baby.
No, but that was my read for the longest time, right? I genuinely was like sort of watching the show and being like, oh, he doesn't really plan on leaving her. But I kind of get the feeling that he's done with Betty. But like, yeah, maybe to what you're saying, it wouldn't be like overnight. I think he is sort of being like, I still haven't figured out what to do. And I think what he's really saying there is like, Don hasn't figured out what to do. And Dick is just trying to like not think about it because he's Dick Whitman at that moment, right? So it is a weird thing. Now there's the whole thing too with how Peggy is sort of like, there is the sort of like casual sexism, like when she does her pitch, and they have the whole thing with like the relaxicizer, the rejuvenator, whatever it's called. You can think of a new name, right, Mike? Where she pitches it to the guys and like right in front of her, like at first they're like, yeah, good pitch. But then they start like talking about Mitch's wife, right? And how she's hot to trot. And like Peggy clearly is like uncomfortable, just like standing there being like subjected to it. But it is kind of interesting because you can tell that part of her might be a little bit thrilled because she is being treated as one of the guys a little bit. Like she is sort of in the room, with them, sort of like on their level. Like it's telling that they, Tim Hunter directed the episode, and it's telling that he has the guys seated, right? And she's sort of standing over them. Like she has power for the first time in the show. And they're sort of like sitting down all ears for her. And like, they're still sitting when they're talking, crap about women and all that in front of her. And she just sort of has to like accept it. And it's an interesting precursor to a lot of what the show is going to deal with.
Yeah. And also I really like the small little touches about like, they're not making her this like advertising savant who comes in and like has a perfect presentation. I love that she comes in, she's like realistic. A little uncomfortable. Like, I wish I could have come in and not know how it works. She has one carbon copy.
Yeah. But the work is good.
But then the work is good, right? So that she just has so much raw talent. I just like that that's what it is, because that's what's realistic about growing in the workplace and in your career. It's not like she was going to go in and just have it perfectly nailed and everybody has their jaws on the floor. I do think it was interesting in that scene. I feel like everybody, obviously except for Pete, because he's a douchebag, like is on her side, like kind of from the jump, like wanting her to succeed. I don't know right now if that's because they like Peggy. I don't know if that's because it was, another woman product. So they're like, women, do your dance, show us how you're going to advertise this woman product. But I like to think it's because they like her. I mean, she gets a way to go pegs at the end, right?
Well, the episode, starts with Freddie Rumsen being like, maybe lightning will strike twice. Still kind of like dismissing her, being like, it's super unlikely, But I think like my read of it is that I think that as soon as they stop sexualizing her, they see her for who she really is. And I think like her weight gain has sort of changed her in the eyes of some of these guys, because they don't view her sexually anymore, because they're very shallow, obviously. But like that just leaves them to sort of see her as her. And yeah, even the most sexist people, I think, can it's kind of like Dawn. It's like they can make exceptions. There are very misogynist people. There are very racist people who are very, very like racist, but they make exceptions for other people, and they use that as sort of a bomb to their own like bigotry, right? It's just sort of like, well, I have a black friend. It's like that whole thing, right? And it's kind of like, well, I'm married to a woman, so like clearly I have a stake in this conversation we're having about women's rights. It's stuff like that. Especially like with Ken Cosgrove. Like there are two moments in this episode that make me kind of feel something. The first one is when Don kind of gives Peggy his first real like mentorship advice, and he's just like, just don't think about it, and then an ideal, like you can tell that in that moment it's just genuine. Like it's just like he thinks that she has potential, that she can do it, and he's being a little bit prickly with her at first, like he would be with like Paul Kinsey, right? But then he sees like a flash of something there, and he says something to her in that moment that he doesn't do with Paul, right? And then later, when Ken everybody's just sort of been like, walking out of the room, joking with her, just like, oh, Freddie's wife. And then Ken comes up and he's just like, hey, good work, Pegs. Calls her Pegs, good work. Bumps her on the shoulder. Like, I don't think he knows how much that probably like made Peggy's life. Because this is Ken. This is the guy who just sort of like, this is like, let's go to the zoo to see what the animals are up to. Like he was just such a punk to her, such a prick. And now he kind of like, has been rehabilitated by the show. 1960 did wonders for Ken Cosgrove, apparently.
I also think it's interesting when you juxtapose all those guys and Peggy too. It's you have that scene where they're all sitting around and just literally discussing, does Don like me? What do we do to get Don to like me? And I don't
Paul's
think
insecurity.
I don't think Peggy ever sits around and goes, does Don like me?
She sits around and reads advertising books. Like you kind of said, she has raw talent. I don't think it's just raw talent. It's like hard work on her part too. It's both.
No, she has, I feel, just like she has a lot of talent that's like needs direction and like needs molding, and that's what she's doing.
She's an artist. Like she has shown herself to be a very astute observer. Like any good artist is. But yeah, the craft of advertising, when applied to that raw talent, like you're saying, is how we end up with somebody who nails that pitch. Although we got to admit, the Latin did make her sound like a valedictorian, just a little bit.
Is that Johnny work in advertising? Is that a thing? Like, or do people tell you like avoid Latin? Like, because I kind of see like an in advertising joke of like, because I know when you make a new website, it's always like in the fake Latin, right? And so I didn't know if that's like an ongoing advertising industry joke.
It is sort of this thing where you don't want to be so brainy that you alienate the everyman or every woman. Like you're supposed to have advertising. Everybody's supposed to see themselves in it. And so when you do things like that in Latin, like, and you try to make yourself look like teacher's pet, you try to make yourself look like the teacher, it makes people feel like they're reading homework. The context is you're reading this in a magazine. You want it to sort of like be an extension of yourself. It does kind of tie in with the way that Don sees himself and other people. In advertising, you're supposed to see yourself in the ad. And that's where I think that's where that is coming from, and that's why like they were one of the main criticisms that they gave to her pitch, like a light criticism, but it was like, hey, we still need a hint of what this thing can do. Because when you read it, advertising is one of those things where you could be so in your head about it, you forget that like, what is somebody with fresh eyes going to think when they read this and be confused of like, well, what is it? And that's kind of what separates, I think, like a really good advertising person, like a creative director level, like Don, and Freddie. He and Freddie are the ones who note that, right? Because they've been in the business a long time. That's what kind of separates them from somebody who's just kind of, a little bit junior, a little bit sort of like trying harder than they need to. And I think that's what that Latin thing is doing, and that's why the name still isn't right. Like rejuvenate, it takes too much work to explain like what that name means. Yeah. That was
but the electric dildo diaper, they get the point across.
I would, yeah, I'm not going to go there actually, but I do love that shot at the end of the episode though, where she just like, like reaches for the briefcase and like fly me to the moon. It's very, very good.
That transition. Is one of the. It's such a good song to go after that. I laughed so hard. Top tier, because I mean they do a really good job with that generally, but this is upper echelon.
Yep, it beats out New Amsterdam's "We'll Have Manhattan." We got to talk about the air conditioner guy, who
man,
low key. He can get it. I'm just put that out there.
For sure. I mean, a little sweaty. He's tan. He works outside all day.
His speaking, tone, he just kind of goes for it. He's just like, can I trouble you for a glass of water? And there's something like to his speaking cadence. I could see why Betty like. Here's my whole thing with that. Betty is sort of like suppressing herself. Her urges. I think in that moment when she's going up the stairs, she feels like, oh yeah, I want to have sex with this guy, like right now. And that's why she has to be like, you got to go. You got to get out of here. Is that your read?
Absolutely.
I think some people would be like, oh, she's just scared. But no, I don't think that's what it is.
Not at all. Because I think you're viewing the scene from Betty's shoes. I think there is like a sexual tension in the air just with how the scene is shot, the cadence, like
what she's wearing.
Exactly. And so I think absolutely she's like, this is going to go bad if this happens, because Betty's a person with no self-control and won't give in to her deepest and biggest urges when she wants to. And I also just love the way she calls it off. Just turn it. We're going to Sears.
Yeah, it's a great commercial for Sears. And he's just like, well, I can leave something. It's something you can discuss with your husband. Please go. She's like, I got to go fantasize about you at the moment.
Meanwhile, I don't think the salesman is like. I think he's literally just being a good door-to-door salesman. Yeah.
Like he just wants to make some money. That's it.
He gets himself in the house. He's just he's doing the pitch. Like he's doing a good job.
I mean, he would have sex with her. He would sex with her if it would get him the sale, right? Like, he's like, okay, I'll do this, but
it's Betty. You would sex with her for any reason, unless you're Dick Whitman.
There you go. But yeah, no, you can tell like he's a young guy. He's unmarried. He's probably a bit younger than Betty. And I think that all is intentional. Like they want him to just sort of be this idealized, like he looks like he's straight out of the 1950s. He kind of looks like in some ways a young Don, what you would imagine a young Don to look like. Like Betty even says, like, I was married to a salesman. And I think there's something about that like, because it's an episode where we talk about the rejuvenator, the return to youth, Betty is feeling like she wants to go back to that time when, she and Don were hot and heavy. But they're not anymore. And I think that's what's like turning her on the most. That's why when she fantasizes, she doesn't fantasize about Don. She fantasizes about the guy who looks like Don. And I don't think it's even like that nefarious on her part of where she would just want to have sex with somebody different. I think for her, it's like she wants to have sex with the guy that she married. There you go.
Yeah, I just think it was like a naughty situation that she thinks back on and like, felt hot about. Just, right. I do think it's very funny that she uses the dryer when we have, the future of masturbation in the show being advertised, but you still have Betty at fucking home.
Hey, it was a DIY approach to the situation.
Exactly. Exactly.
We get a little bit more
Different
Harry Crane.
generations.
We get more Harry Crane in this episode. I didn't want to leave him out. Where, you know, that scene you already referenced where they're all kind of sitting around. Paul is just sort of like, do you think Don likes me? Pete is all jealous. He's just like, we're all sort of supporting Don. I think at one point, Paul kind of is like, hey, you know, Don likes you. And he's like, yeah, because I work at it. And there's like, there are a few subtle hints, like where Harry just sort of like, it's obvious, right? What's going to happen. They're going to bump him up to partner. This is one of those scenes where I think that they are sort of setting the groundwork for like, Harry's like a real manipulator. Like he's a real political actor. He like knows the ins and outs of like what's going to happen. He's kind of like a swarmy dude. And I really like that they're setting that up this early because I think it does take time to see more of the Harry Crane that we know throughout the show. I just don't want to point that out there.
I think it's definitely a good thing to mark for listeners who are going through it their first time. Because as much as I don't like Harry, he's a really interesting character, and it's really interesting what he does throughout the course of the show.
I'm writing a new book, and in his honor, I'm writing one of the worst characters, like one of the most annoying characters, Rich Winters instead of Rich Summer. So I hope Rich Summer appreciates that. That's amazing. That's very good. Very happy about that. We also get a little bit we get a bunch of Sal in this episode. Poor Will got to miss all the Sal content discussion this week, but sadly, Will's in the middle of a big move. That's why he's not here. But Sal's sort of being like, I sent my resume this afternoon. Do you think he really did that, though? I kind of don't. I kind of think he's just like lying, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, who makes I've been in a position where it's like, oh, I got to find a new job. And even I, with the gift of technology, don't edit my resume that fast because it's really annoying to do. There is no fucking way in the hour from him having a coronary that he goes out, collates, and sends it all out.
Yeah, exactly.
Also the same way, sorry.
No, please.
I said also the same way there's no way he actually was into what's-his-face's wife's halter top at the last company picnic.
I was just about to bring that up where they're just like, she's so attractive. He's like, yeah, that knot of like the gingham, like halter top. Like, I was like, oh, okay, Sal. that's what was hot about her. Yeah. Love him love him for that. Do we want to talk more about we talked about the Peggy date scene. We did cover a lot of it, but I think that like, I just can't get over sort of like how bad at this date they both are. Because like with him, like he is being so super patronizing too. And Andy's being super like fragile, you know, like he can't believe that like this woman is like talking down to him and all that. Clearly he's the worst person in this situation, but I do think that like it speaks to a broader thing in this episode of like how this job is so destructive to your personal life. We kind of like alluded to. You know, Peggy doesn't have like a friendship with her roommate Marjorie. She kind of lies about, or she kind of like tries to imply that like, oh, Joan, she's a scream. You know, like she and Joan aren't friends. Like she doesn't have friends. She's just like kind of alone. And it is kind of like a scary sort of like thing that I think that like Peggy is placing herself in, like how she is like this connection she has with her work is sort of alienating other people. And I think it's it's one of the more subtler points of the episode. I don't think this episode's amazing at like tying all these things together. It's kind of another thing like with Long Weekend where I feel like we spend most of the episode kind of setting up the next two episodes, and it's more of like a transition than it is like a standalone episode of the show. So it's not one of the better ones, but it's effective. It's functional.
This is one of the episodes I really, really struggled with. The episode ended and I was like, all right, let's go next one, because I want to keep watching. And so I think you're exactly right. It does set up the next couple episodes, but I think with Peggy, especially on that date, it's really clear that you mentioned that her and Joan aren't friends. I don't think they're friends. I definitely think they're work friends though.
Sure.
I think
they're
Peggy
friendly.
She's so I wouldn't say enamored. I don't think that's a word, but I think it's close to the word I want to use. Enamored with work. See, like it was close to the word. I got you to get it.
Well, we get a hint of what she really wants with it, right? Because she wants to be Manhattan.
Exactly.
She wants to be one of the Manhattan girls.
Have you ever done that though at work, where like you're maybe when you're younger, or maybe the first time at a cool company, and you think like your work friends are your real friends, and you don't understand the difference?
Not really. You know, I'm a very antisocial person. I can be very distant.
I'm an extroverted sales guy. I definitely would go through that. I'm like, oh yeah, this guy should be in my wedding. I worked with him for 3 months.
I had one coworker at my wedding, because he was like my mentor, like for years. But you know, I felt a little bit bad. I wanted more of my coworkers at my wedding, but it's just one of those things where I just don't have like that close of a, you know. I don't know. I've always been like that.
Did you invite your coworker Jon Hamm?
No comment.
Yeah,
He didn't come. You were there. You didn't see him.
I know. I don't know why I just publicly try to make you admit that Jon Hamm didn't come to your wedding.
Yeah, no, just like really brought me to tears here. Also, I got it. I was going to bring this up a second ago, but a lesser show to what you're saying would have ended with Pete and the box, right? Being like, ooh, what's going to happen next, right? But instead it ends with Peggy, because this is a show for artistes.
Also, again, very cool dichotomy they're doing here in juxtaposition of Pete spiraling, being so upset he didn't get what he wanted, kicks his, pretending he's the guy, right? And he steals the box, and then you go to Peggy, who actually is on the rise. And that's what it looks like when your career is taking off versus when you're a douchebag.
Hey, there you go.
Jon,
And then if you do that read, then you could Fly Me to the Moon has another meaning too. Well done.
Yeah. What do you think's going to happen? What's in the box, Jon? What's in the box?
Well, I mean, clearly something that is going to make things difficult for Dawn. I mean, we obviously know.
What if it didn't? What if it was nothing? That'd be so cool.
That it would be like a weird Chekhov's not gun, I guess. It's like, look at this gun.
Chekhov's MacGuffin?
Yeah. We need that gun, and then you fire it, nothing happens, and then I guess in this case you just wouldn't fire it. Like Pete would just be like, huh, that's weird. Who's Dick Whitman? And then just like throws it away. I mean, this is like that kind of show where that could happen.
Picture this. It's a season finale. We're 2 episodes later. The box, it's sitting there. He forgot about it. Something happens. There's 2 minutes left in the episode. He walks up, grabs the box, unwraps it, gets out a knife, cutting to Dawn, who's in slow-mo, enjoying his life. Back to Pete. He's cutting. Back to Dawn. Oh no, what's going to happen? Close up on his face. Back to Pete. He opens up the box. Some motherfucking chip and dip.
That's one of the funniest things you've ever said. I think that's a good place to end it. Unless you had anything else. Holy shit, that was good. I'm just imagining Pete's face where he's like, great, now I have 6 of these.
Exactly. And like it ends with like, son of a, and it cuts off at the bitch.
Yeah.
And then it's just like the Always Sunny, like for the post-credit scene, like
no, I mean he's like, son of a, cut my life up into pieces. It's gonna do the Silicon Valley thing. Yeah. All right. We did get some Francine in this episode. Can't leave Francine out. I love Francine. I love how in this episode she has like some really pregnant pauses with Betty, where she's just like, why'd you tell him? You can tell she's just like tired, and she's just sort of like, Betty, what the hell?
Yeah, it's like because she's playing the same role that Betty's playing, but she's just like, doesn't have a child's brain and emotion capability. So it's just like
she's
just like exhausting to be Betty's friend.
Exactly. Yeah, she's just a little bit like, God, why are you the way that you are? Because we did have that. It wasn't that long ago, right? Where she had the episode with she comes over and she has to like trick Betty into like, this is Bobby's shirt. No, it's not anyway. Even you're right. Francine even treats Betty like a child, which is a self-fulfilling prophecy. The more people treat Betty and talk down to her and condescend and dismiss her, the more she's going to be like a child. So
I do think
Yeah.
it was on purpose that conversation took place in a nursery.
Also, yeah. Also, we didn't talk really about like Roger has a second coronary. Bert Cooper kind of gets knocked down a peg by Mona. Wonderful, wonderful scene there. I love that scene.
I was just going to bring that up about with Mona telling him off, because what's also interesting about that is the fact that Lucky Strike's guy is there, and he's the one who really pushes and makes the partner play happen for Don, which is so interesting to think back to episode 1, where he's like, "Who is this Yankee Doodle dandy telling me how to run?"
Well,
my
Don's
company?
really come through for them, right? Like Don,
Exactly.
Their sales have been through the roof, arguably for reasons have nothing to do with Don's campaign, but sort of like because it's 1960 and people are hot to trot. But no, I mean, I think that like Mona's statement there is very telling of just sort of like, I used to think you couldn't put a value on a human life, but I didn't, think of Bert Cooper. It kind of speaks to like his Ayn Rand philosophy, right? He brings her up again later in the episode and it's just like, beware the nonconformist, when he offers Don the partnership, I'm going to introduce you to Ayn Rand. I think you'll salivate, or she'll salivate. But that is that sort of like, that's the nature of the objectivist, I can never say it right, philosophy that Ayn Rand preached in the 1960s and beyond. Like, this thing that it's like, it's not about human life, it's about human value. It's about something far more cynical and less human that I think Weiner is clearly putting into the episode. By the way, we didn't mention, he co-wrote this episode with Tom Palmer. I don't remember let me look it up. I don't think Tom Palmer wrote any other episodes with Matthew Weiner, but he wrote a few, the early ones. Yeah, he wrote Marriage of Figaro and, that might be it. Just Marriage of Figaro. And then he co-wrote this one. And that's it for Tom Palmer in this season. But Matthew Weiner does have one more episode left that he wrote. So yeah.
It makes sense Weiner has his hand in, trying to land the plane of the season, right?
Sure. He directs the last episode, I know that, for The Wheel, which a lot of people consider the best episode of the whole season. It certainly has like one of the most iconic scenes in the whole show, but we'll get to that. But yeah, Last Thoughts on Indian Summer, very solid episode of the show. I think it's better than Long Weekend. Like I enjoy watching this episode more, but it still is a little bit of a slog compared to some of the best episodes. Like it's not one of those episodes where I can always watch these twice before we talk about them, and I can tell which ones I like the most by which ones I want to watch again the most. These past two, I've been sort of like forcing myself a little bit. This one less so. This one I was a little bit looking forward to like certain scenes again, compared to Long Weekend, where I was just like, I don't want to do this. I think I just do not like this episode as much. But I think that's probably going to change next week because Nixon Kennedy is a good one.
Nixon Kennedy is one of my favorite episodes of the season, of the show. There's a couple of moments in it that I'm just, it's still I think about all the time. But yeah, no, this episode I think it really capitalizes on the momentum that Long Weekend gives all the plot lines. And I think it continues that and really catapults us into what I think is a near perfect season finale of a show that it can have. These last couple episodes, buckle up, they're great.
All right. Well, if you're listening and you're sort of like, well, you know what? I have something to say. Definitely hit us up. Let us know what you think of the episode. Find us on Twitter at MadMenMenPod. And just tell us what you're thinking about it. Be careful of spoilers. We're trying to keep him away from Will Ash, and he hasn't watched the whole show, but he doesn't have access to the Twitter. I've made sure of that. So the Twitter is a safe place. Just DM us. I think our DMs are open. And give us a follow if you want. But we'll be back on next week for Nixon versus Kennedy. Can't wait. And Mike, thanks for doing this one-on-one. Thanks for coming into the house and doing the measurements. And I kind of want to go upstairs with you right now. So I guess we should stop recording.
I'm going to Apple Podcasts.
Bye, everybody.